Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm really lucky here tonight. I am honored. I am excited. Like I say, I'm lucky. I have Amanda Otto on the phone right now, calling in from Alaska, and I'm going to have her tell us a little bit about her. But I will tell you what I know. Amanda Otto is an Iron Woman. She's a warrior. She's young. She's beautiful, and she just finished in eighth place in the Iditarod Trail sled dog race, and really, really did great. Amanda, are you there?
I'm here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad that you're taking the time to do this. And how are you feeling? I mean, a couple of days ago you had strep throat.
Yeah, I'm recovering. I'm on the mend. I'm a little sleepy, but other than that, I think we're coming along great. Throat's not on fire anymore, so that's nice.
You did just spend 9 days, 18 hours, 24 minutes, and 33 seconds mushing the trail. How sleep deprived were you while you were out there?
Shockingly, so sleep deprivation is usually the toughest aspect of the sport for me. And all things considering, I think I handled it pretty well for those 9 days. I did drink my weight in coffee and Tang, so that might have had something to do with it.
All right.
But you know what? Yeah, there were a couple of nights that I had a tough time staying awake. Typically during a dog race, you're kind of looking at a 4 to 6 hour run and a 4 to 6 hour break, depending on how fast or slow that run went afterwards. But the dogs are getting that break. So assuming you get your dogs taken care of and all your chores done, because you got to massage the dogs, look everybody over, get them fed, watered, repack their lunch and their snacks for the next run, take care of yourself, get all your stuff repacked, ready for the next run. That typically leaves you about 90 minutes to take a nap if you're quick. So you're kind of averaging an hour to a 90-minute nap every 4 to 6 hours. Well, I guess you're going to double that. So every 12 hours or so, maybe.
Well, I know the dogs are the superstars, but you're a superstar too. It takes a special person to be able to do something like this. And, well, for one thing, I hope Tang or your coffee, whatever you drink, I know what it takes. And we'll get into sponsors, but maybe you can get your coffee brand or Tang to sponsor you. I know it's a tough business to feed all the dogs and go year to year. This was only your second Iditarod, is that correct?
Correct. This was Iditarod number 2.
Well, tell us all, tell the listeners, how did you wind up in Alaska? How did you wind up in Denali at Husky Homestead? And how did you get into mushing?
Yeah, well, I've been working with dogs for very long, basically my entire life. I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't have dogs. I grew up with the fake sled dogs. We had Alaskan Malamutes growing up. I'm from Idaho originally, and my mom and I raised Australian Shepherds. That was later in high school. So dogs have always been a big part of my life. I did a lot of agility, 4-H, all the dog sport things as a kid, and even a little bit of mushing. My dad used to take me to the Ashton Dog Derby in Ashton, Idaho, and we'd do the little mutt race there down Main Street with the Malamutes, which was always pretty fun.
The mutt race,
So,
was that like
yeah,
a what?
basically anybody, it's kind of a fun event for the kids. So, mom and dad brings the kid and 1 or 2 dogs, and you hook them up to a sled, and they do like a 100-yard dash down Main Street. So I don't know that I would call it mushing so much as hanging on for dear life.
Well, you got hooked early.
Yeah, so I technically ran my first dog sled race around age 8, but I was a pretty avid soccer player growing up, and soccer paid for college. Dogs did not. So the dog thing kind of took a back seat for a while.
College in Idaho?
No, I actually went to college in Southern California at a little D2 school called Biola University. And I graduated from there in 2016 and came up to Alaska. I was living up here in the interior, just down in Cantwell. It's about 20 minutes south or so of Denali, where we are now. And was running dogs there, worked at another sled dog operation, and wasn't really interested in racing at the time. I just wanted to be in Alaska and really kind of immerse myself in the world of mushing and be able to run dogs well. I wanted to travel with dogs. Racing was not on the radar yet. And so I spent a year up here, 2016, 2017. I did handle at the 2017 Iditarod. I tag sledded with someone at the ceremonial start. And at that point, I thought, okay, if we're going to scoop poop for a living, why don't we make Iditarods a goal? That's kind of where that idea was born. But I did have some student debt to pay off. Still working on the student debt. Yay, American education system.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually took a break from Alaska. I went out and got my captain's license and was driving boats in Grand Teton National Park, doing a little bit of freelance journalism and the dog thing on the side for about 2 years. And then I moved back here in 2019 after I'd saved up some cash and was ready to start getting my qualifiers done and working towards the Iditarod. So I actually got connected with Jeff in 2019 when I came back here. Had some mutual friends that I worked with in Grand Teton National Park that were then working for him. So I ended up coming to his Thanksgiving party. This immediately kind of struck me as a really generous guy. Loves his community, loves his dogs. Had a really great first impression of him, and we kind of hit it off. And things weren't working out super well at my previous place of employment. And basically in January of 2020, I jumped ship and started handling for him. And then COVID hit, and there's all sorts of kind of question marks in the air there, but we muddled through that. And I actually knocked all of my qualifying races out that following winter, during the winter of COVID, because dog mushing is kind of the one sport that could still go on and be socially distant. So I ended up doing all those races in one go and ran Iditarod the following year in 2022.
Now, when you mentioned qualifying, you're qualifying for the Iditarod.
Yeah, so you can't just show up to the starting line with a team of dogs and say, hey, I want to run to Nome. You do need to complete 750 miles of qualifying events, and that usually entails 2 300-mile races and then another race that has to be a minimum of 150. And I did 2 300s and a 200-mile race. And you do need to pass those races without incident. You don't need to finish in any particular order, but you do need to finish and finish well. And there's typically a panel of judges that are all Iditarod veterans, and they're evaluating you as a rookie, so to speak, at these races. And they're looking at how your dog care is, how you handle sleep deprivation, what your attitude is like. Are you wilderness savvy, and all those things. And then once you finish your qualifying races, they essentially turn in a report card to the Iditarod along with a letter from, an established musher that knows your abilities, your capabilities, and says, I think this person is a good candidate to sign up for Iditarod.
I think you're really hooked up with a great guy, with Jeff. I got a chance to interview him, and you were in Alaska in 2016. I'll never forget what happened to Jeff out there on the trail. He has had so many great races, and been in such brutal conditions, and we'll get to that too. I'm interested in the conditions this year, but this is the first year that 4 women have finished in the top 10. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it really is, and I guess I didn't even realize that until they had announced it, once all the dust had settled. But, I think it's an awesome accomplishment. I think sometimes, when you're kind of thrown into the world of any professional sport, you're automatically kind of a role model to other little girls and, happy to serve in that capacity. I think more importantly, though, and I think Paige Drobny touched on this as well, but I think it's also important, too, for the world to see us as mushers. It's not so much a gender thing, male versus female. Here in Alaska, you got to be able to get it done. It's kind of about who the best dog team is and who the best dog driver is. And, I think it is really neat, and I'm obviously honored to be a part of that. To have 4 of us finish in the top 10 for the first time ever, I think that is a pretty special accomplishment. But a lot of that, I think, starts with the folks who came before us, Libby and Susan, and we have a lot of good friends who have run the Iditarod as well back in the day, and I think a lot of that credit goes to them as well.
Yeah, Libby was a sweet interview, and she was surprised that I knew her sled was in the Smithsonian. Maybe someday Amanda Otto's sled will be in the Smithsonian.
Possible.
Do you know most of the other teams? You mentioned Paige Drobny. I just wondered if you knew most of the others.
I know a handful of them. You know, we're typically so busy as dog mushers, you really don't get to see them a ton. But over the years, I have got to know a few of them. You know, Paige and Cody live just south of us in Cantwell, out in the Denali Highway, so I do see them a little bit more than most other mushers. Typically see Jesse Holmes on a fairly regular basis out there too. But generally speaking, you kind of know who people are, but you don't really see them until you show up at a dog race, and then you're busy running dogs, so you're not doing a ton of chatting. At least I'm not.
It's kind of a turnover for all the mushers that I've followed for years and years. A lot of them are no longer there, so I think it is a transition to a lot of younger people on the trail. And you went from this was only your second Iditarod. Your first, I think you finished in like 27th place. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah. I actually don't remember, but I think it was 27th or 26th, something like that.
So you made a huge jump.
I did. Well, you know, in my rookie year, the goal was not to be competitive. It was just to finish. You know, that was my rookie year. A lot of the dogs in my team, that was also their rookie year. And we had some pretty early setbacks, the equipment malfunctions, and some things with the dogs. And that's kind of mushing, too, is nothing really ever goes as planned, and you need to be able to adapt and change your game plan. So there was no push to finish in the top 10 or even the top 20. We were taking our time. We got to actually travel a lot of the trail with Jeff later into that race, as he happened to be in the event that year last minute. And it was pretty cool that I can count on one hand leading up to that point that Jeff and I had been mushing together. So it was really neat and pretty special, in my opinion, to get to travel the trail with him and not be in a hurry. And then I did the Yukon Quest this last year, the Yukon Quest 550. In lieu of the Iditarod, we had a young crew of dogs, and I felt like maybe shorter mileage was in their best interest, just training everybody together as a whole. We ended up taking second in that, and also got the humanitarian award, which I'm really proud of. So,
I am really impressed with that award. I think.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's all about the dogs, and when you can get an award, I think that was unanimous that year.
It was.
For exemplar. What is the word I'm looking for? Dog care. But the Yukon Quest. Now they got different distances on that. I was thinking that was 1,000 miles for some reason.
It used to be 1,000 miles. It no longer is. Now there's shorter races on each side. They say they're talking about potentially fielding a 1,000-mile event again. We'll see if that happens. But last year, 2023, it was 550 miles. And the fun part was they actually sent us over the toughest sections of the trail twice. So we actually went up and over both Rosebud and Eagle Summit twice, came back and then traveled the Nenana and finished in Fairbanks. So I think it was actually, you know, all things considering, they did a great job, put on a great race, and it was, I think, a little bit easier for spectators and fans to also be involved because they could actually drive to some of the checkpoints.
When, like that, let's go back to the Iditarod. How many veterinarians are involved? Is there one at every checkpoint?
There are typically several at every checkpoint, yes. There's at least one head veterinarian and then usually a couple of vet techs, oftentimes 2 or 3 vets. So there's usually right around 40, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere around 40 come from all over the world to offer their expertise to us. And they are waiting at every single checkpoint to evaluate your dog team, do quick vitals. If you have a dog that you're concerned about, obviously we're going to have them take a look at them. But they are on 24. They're not getting any more sleep than we are, so they deserve a huge round of applause.
So when you blow straight through a checkpoint, I think the minimum is just a few minutes. That's just to sign something and have the vets check your dogs. Is that it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you don't necessarily have to have them all checked over if they don't need it. You know, you typically know your dogs better than the race veterinarians. But yeah, while you are, you know, getting your straw for the next camping run and standing there signing in and out, they will go ahead and do a quick, if they need to do a quick orthopedic exam on somebody, just make sure everybody's mobility, heart and lungs are good. They can actually do that pretty quickly. And sometimes you're there for 5 to 10 minutes, and that's plenty of time for them to do a quick check on everybody, make sure they're ready to go.
Who does all the logistics for you, like having everything at the checkpoints?
So that's all done beforehand, and what we do is we ship out, I think this year I shipped out 1,500 pounds of food for both the dogs and myself, a few special gear items that I might need, like some spare runner plastic, maybe a change of clothes, some warmer layers at a few checkpoints. But that's all shipped out about 2 weeks before the race even begins.
Okay. Do you have friends along the route or not?
Yes, you can. It is pretty difficult and remote, so oftentimes, unless the person happens to be volunteering with Iditarod, you're probably not going to see them on the trail. Usually the first couple runs, at least out to Squetna, is an opportunity to see people. You know, it's kind of like a big tailgating party. People are out there snow machining, and big crowd really until you get about 70 miles away from the starting line. But once you get out past Squetna, you're pretty remote, and most of those checkpoints are only accessible by float plane or snow machine.
Okay.
So, yeah, so unless your friends are, which I have had that, you know, friends volunteer with the Iditarod, and then they come see you on the trail, you're basically seeing those people that you know at the beginning and the end of the trail.
Okay. Now, this year was north-south, is that right?
It was the northern route, yes.
The northern
Even
route?
years it's the northern route, and odd years is the southern route.
What were conditions like? How was the snow depth, wind, cold, all that?
Yeah. You know, the snow depth was fine. It was a little slow at times. I can count on one hand the amount of fast runs we had. I don't know how everybody else felt, but I definitely felt like it was a slightly slower trail, some punchier snow in certain spots. But all in all, I thought it was a great trail. It was just the right amount of snow cover. You know, I don't know that we were ever doing any heavy trail breaking. There were a few runs that had some of that slower, like mashed potato snow, where you kind of just feel like you're churning butter all the way to the next checkpoint. But all things considering, I thought it was a really great trail. You know, some of those more notorious sections that in the beginning, like the Happy River Steps and the Dalzell Gorge, they were all pretty well blanketed, didn't have any issues in them. There's a little bit of open water, as we have had a warmer year this year, but there was nothing too crazy. And, well, I guess until the very end, I did encounter some 60-mile winds about 30 miles from the finish line.
Is that the infamous blowhole?
That, you know, the blowhole wasn't bad, and it was ripping in there, too. I couldn't see my leaders. That was some pretty strong wind, but as long as you can keep your momentum and stay on the trail, it's typically not an issue. And I was doing that section in the dark, and we cruised through Topcock Hills. That's also a pretty windy spot, as well as the blowhole. We didn't really run into any problems until we got down onto the coast in this spot between Solomon and Safety. And this is actually an area where Jeff had to scratch one year on his way to his fifth Iditarod victory. And the wind was just incessant there. I mean, it was definitely 60-mile-an-hour winds. We got blown about 30 feet off the trail. It pointed the whole dog team out to sea kind of thing. And not a moment to panic, but it definitely, when you lose that momentum in that kind of weather, it does take you a little bit. It takes you a little bit to get going and get back on the trail, because you got to get everybody turned around and get them lined out, and then you take off. And it wasn't a big deal. You know, we didn't panic. I anchored him down, and we had a little bit of a tangle, obviously, when we got blown off the trail. So I got that sorted out as best I could and gave everybody their meat snack. You know, we carry snacks for the dogs and adequate food to feed them with as we go down the trail. And shockingly, just about all of them ate in 60-mile-an-hour winds. As you can imagine, us just standing there with being pelted by the wind. And, I had actually just put my spare light on the back of my sled. You know, when the wind is ripping like that and it's dark, I was doing the section of trail really early morning, so dark hours. You walk 5 feet away and you can't see it. So I had put my spare headlight, I had hung it off the back of my sled so I could come back to it and walked back to what I thought was the trail. Having a little bit of a difficult time deciphering where the trail was at that point, just because we'd gotten so spun off. And there were no markers at that point. There was a section of trail that they'd either got blown over or knocked down by the couple people that had been in front of us. And so I had actually been looking at scratch marks on the ice to make sure that we were still going the right direction. And I had just got back to the trail when Jessie Royer came by. I built up a little bit of a lead over her and Pete, and then obviously lost it at that point. And she came by and kind of lamented the same thing, and we were talking about, isn't this the trail? And yeah, I think it is. And, you know, she asked me if I was all right, and I said, yep, I'm just going to get turned around, and I'll be right behind you. So she took off into the night, and I got my guys turned around, and went to hop back on the trail, and I still had a couple of them that were tangled up, so I was getting them unsorted when Pete Kaiser came by, and he was shouting something, and the wind was so strong that I almost couldn't hear him, and so I had to walk up to him and go, "What?" And he said, "Follow, follow." And I think he thought that we were stalled there, which it probably looked like. And I was just sitting there untangling a couple of dogs, and so I was actually really thankful to hang out with him. And we traveled, and I could tell he was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit nervous at that point. I mean, you don't know fear until you're sitting there in 60-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So we took off like a herd of turtles into the night, fighting the wind coming at us pretty strong from our right, which is also in that particular section of trail, you're going the right way if you can keep the wind on the right side of your face. And we finally found some markers again, and we actually looked off to our left, and we could see Jessie's light way off to the left down by the sea ice. She had gotten off trail a little bit as well and recognized it herself as she started to see jumble ice. So we started blinking our headlights at her, in the dark, trying to get her to come back this way. And she made it up, and we actually all kind of traveled together for a little while until the wind died down, and then we kind of dispersed and did our own things. And I actually had to pull over in safety to sort out the last of my tangle. I had two dogs that were cinched together just tight enough that I didn't want them running 20 miles to Nome like that. So Jessie and Pete took off, and I didn't think I was going to see him again, and I got my tangle unsorted and was able to snack the dogs, and then thought, you know what, let's go for it. I think we got the faster dog team. So we hopped on and took off, and we caught Jessie, and then I caught Pete on the coast, and he gave me the thumbs up. I think I was traveling about 2 miles an hour faster than he was at that point, and we hauled it on to Front Street in Nome, and it was a pretty picture-perfect finish for these guys. I'm very proud of them. Most of them I've raised myself from day one, from puppyhood, and so to have 12 of them there with me at the finish line was pretty special.
It really is about the dogs, and it must be something to mush underneath that burled arch there at the end, knowing that you've just finished. I don't know what the official distance was this year, 975 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty close to, And by the way, since you mentioned it, I still feel for Jeff leading on heading for his 5th win in a record time and getting caught in that kind of weather.
It's pretty intense, and quite frankly, I hadn't really thought about it until we got blown off the trail right there, and that was literally the first thing that ran through my mind as I thought, oh my God, this is the spot. This is the spot. And I hadn't at all felt unsafe or inadequately able, obviously, to care for the dogs at that point. But for a split second, getting blown off there, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the spot. This is not a good place to be. We need to keep moving. We can't stop here. And that was going through my mind as I was getting everybody turned around and making sure they were all sorted out and okay. And they were, I had 3 of them would not shut up, and they're banging in the harness like, let's go, why do we stop, just tangling everybody else up further. And, they were not at all fazed whatsoever, but it does kind of go through your mind. It's one of those, when you know of the history of a spot, it definitely gets your antennas up a little bit quicker.
It really takes a special person. You are a special person, that bond with your dogs. I got to ask, I love dog names. I knew a lot of Jeff's dogs. How many? Yeah. You can start with how many now? 14, is it now?
You can actually, so as of this year, they went back to 16.
Okay.
It was 16 for a while, and then they changed it to 14. I'm a big fan of the 14, as is Jeff. I did not start with 16 this year. I didn't feel like I had 16 that, were ready to compete in a 1,000-mile race. I have a lot of young dogs, and so I left a couple 2-year-olds at home, and and I finished with 12 of them. So I don't think that a bigger team necessarily denotes a better team. It's great for everybody who wants to start with 16 or 14. I think it's not so much about the number, but how well prepared your team is to start the race.
What's the usual age on a dog? What were the ages of the dogs that you ran this year?
I had a couple of 2-year-olds and a couple 3-year-olds, and I've got 2 4-year-olds and a 5-year-old. So it's a pretty young team. I really only had, I had 6 veterans who had done Iditarod before, but even though most of those guys were only about 5 years old, and then I had a 7-year-old, and 2 6-year-olds. So it was a pretty young team. Team that was able to also obviously be competitive. I think that was a really good age. Really proud of the couple 2-year-olds in there that finished. They were fabulous. And I think the average, that kind of average competitive age that you're really looking at is between 3 and 7, probably more so 5 and 7 for most teams.
Okay.
And the Alaskan Husky, though, is a very healthy dog. We talked about this during our tour presentation that we do for our guests. And it's just factual information that I think people enjoy. But the Alaskan Husky, I think a lot of people are expecting to see a Siberian Husky or a Malamute. And the Alaskan Husky is kind of like if you were comparing a thoroughbred to a Clydesdale.
Okay.
That's kind of the difference between the Alaskan Husky and the Siberian Husky. So these Alaskan Huskies are very healthy dogs. They're not recognized by the American Kennel Club as a pure breed of dog. They're bred for a performance standard, so bred for what they do, not what they look like. And they don't really possess a uniform appearance. But most of them are going to live to be about 17 or 18 years old thanks to genetics, diet, and exercise.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It's very impressive, very healthy animals. It is not uncommon to see 10-year-old dogs, sometimes even 11-year-old dogs in somebody's Iditarod team.
Wow.
Obviously, once they're that age, they're probably not being competitive anymore. But it is absolutely possible for them to go down the trail at a leisurely pace. Here at Husky Homestead, and this is one of the things I love about Jeff, but we actually retire our dogs around 7 years old. And it's not because they don't want to run anymore. We just want them to be able to live out the second half of their life in a pet home, doing what, an everyday dog does. And sometimes they might go, we might rehome them to inactive, like a recreational musher. One of our favorite homes is actually a junior musher, a young kid who's learning the sport, because now they've got, some veteran, level-headed dogs that know the drill, and they get to do what they love on the weekends, but then they also get to come inside and live on the couch during the week, which is kind of like hitting the jackpot.
Yeah, I'd say so. How many dogs are at Husky Homestead right now?
Not as many as people think. Most competitive kennels are operating with 40 to 50 dogs minimum. I have 18 race-age adult. Most of those guys are 2 years old. And then we have a handful of puppies that are about 9 months old now that we kept from this last summer. So they're a pretty small operation right now. And I kind of like that. I think it's a more intimate experience. That's about all I can handle by myself, quite frankly. So that's plenty of dogs for me. But I do think it's a more intimate experience. I think I've had far more success training in small teams in the same way that you play small-sided scrimmages, in any human sports team. I think we have found, at least for myself, way more success working on the small side of things versus having a ton of dogs. I think just the quality of the training and the quality of their care, in my opinion, is better with smaller numbers.
Am I correct? Are there lead dog? I know there's a lead dog. Are there swing dogs and wheel dogs? Is that what they're called?
Absolutely. So I'll explain the positions front to back. So in the front, you've got your leaders. Just behind the lead dogs are the swing dogs. And I'll go back to the leaders for a second. They're kind of like the pilots of the operation, right? They're doing the bulk of the mental work. They are listening for turn commands, which are G, which means right, and HA, which means left.
Okay.
Or maybe I might tell them straight ahead and all right, which means go. The swing dogs that are right behind the leaders, they're also listening for commands, but their job in a nutshell is kind of to take the dog team out wide when we go around a corner. Sled dogs naturally like to suck to an inside corner when you go around a turn. And if you can imagine with a big dog team and you're at the back end with the sled, that might not bode very well for you when you get to that corner.
Right.
So that's kind of the swing job dog. Any dog that is in the middle of the team, and you can have as many of those as you want, that's just a team dog. And they're waiting for their chance to run up front in that lead or swing position or the very back position right in front of the sled, which is called wheel. And that wheel position is a really athletic position. That dog, or those dogs rather, need to be able to move freely back and forth between the toe line. The dogs are actually not doing as much pulling as many people think. Once you got 8 or 10 dogs hooked up together, they're kind of just trotting in front of the sled. The amount of pulling they're doing collectively is very, very minimal. So
Okay.
again, they're marathon runners or distance runners. Again, they're kind of like the thoroughbreds of the sled dog world. So kind of just trotting in front of the sled. But if there is any pulling to be had, those wheel dogs are kind of taking on the bulk of the purse. In fact, Jeff kind of likes to use the analogy. It's like, you know, for ladies carrying a purse on their shoulder, or maybe somebody having a backpack on, and you're shifting that weight around. That's kind of what we're doing with the wheel dogs. We're actually rotating that position out pretty frequently. We're not leaving the same dogs in wheel all the time. And same things with the leaders. You know, that's a lot of mental work. Now, granted, I had 2 dogs in particular that led about 700 miles of the Iditarod. One is my own dog, Fossil, that Jeff gifted to me. He's about just turned 3 years old this month. And then his mom, Patience, who's been a very special dog to me over the last 5 years. This was her second Iditarod. And they're a mother and son duo, and again, led 700 miles for me, and that was great. But again, it's a lot of mental responsibility, and there's different lead dogs for different types of situations. I think Fossil, for me, has been one of those dream dogs, you know, one of those once-in-a-lifetime, will do just about anything you ask of him, is good in any situation, whether he's experienced it before or not, just because he trusts me, you know, I'm his person. But generally speaking, most of the dogs in the team can lead. It just kind of depends on what the situation is. You know, one of the analogies we use to describe our dog team is we think of them as a group of Navy SEALs, right? They are all capable of running at any position at any time, but some are better up there in certain situations than others. As an example, going through the gorge, I knew we were going to encounter some open water, so I had a little dog named Luna up front there for a time because she's great at finding her way across streams. You know, I have a couple other dogs that don't really like to cross open water in the dark. Another dog that comes to mind is Butch. You know, I had him up front going through the blowhole because he is unfazed by wind. In fact, he does better in low visibility situations. So a lot of the times, and I think this is one of the many reasons why Jeff found so much success in mushing, is you got to know how long to have a dog in what position and why. It's really knowing your dogs on an intimate level, what their strengths are, but also what their weaknesses are. You know, everybody wants to talk about what you do well. What do you not do well, both yourself and your dogs? I had a great quote from another musher once about, you know, if we could talk about what we're looking for as we train dogs, but we're kind of training Superman, right? We are teaching them that they can do just about anything, and we're never, ever showing them something that they can't do, right? We want to set them up to success. We don't ever want to set them up to fail. In the same way that you're building a team, you know, on a human sports level. So it's knowing your players intimately, and again, just knowing who to have where for how long and why.
You had Patience and Fossil and Butch, and who else did you have out there with you?
Luna had some time up front, as well as Muscle and Phantom. I think of the 12 dogs that finished with me, 7 of them led at some point of the race, but Fossil and Patience definitely did the bulk of it, about 700 miles.
How many dog booties do you go through?
You know, those boots are really only good for about 50 miles or so.
Is that right?
Well, with the dog's toenails trimmed down, you can get probably 100 miles out of them. And I do send all my booties back home in a return bag. We don't ever throw those away. That's a very high commodity, very expensive item. They're about $1.40 a piece, and you need 4 per dog every 50 miles. So I'm not a math person, but if you do the math, that's a lot of booties.
That's
You're looking at about 2,000 for the race, and that's not even for the months of training leading up to the race.
What?
So the booties, I'm changing them out roughly every 50 miles. You know, it's not that they necessarily need to be changed out, especially if you're on a nice, fast trail. You know, odds are they're probably good for another 50, but you're probably stopping every 50 miles, and you don't want to leave the booties on while they're resting because you don't want anything constricting the blood flow to the dog's wrist. So we're going to take those off, and then it's just easier after your 4-hour break or whatever it is to throw some new ones on.
I don't even know if you have to tie each one of those, or are they elastic, or what? How are they held on?
Yep. So ours, there's a couple different models. Ours have an elastic Velcro. So it's got Velcro on the patch of the booty, and then there's an elastic band that wraps around, and that is how the booty stays secure. One of the things we do to make sure it stays secure is you want to pull it up. The booty should fit fairly snug It shouldn't be fitting like a clown shoe. Their toes should be able to, be free but not spread out that far. So it should fit like a nice fitting sock, if you will. And it's not really meant to protect their pads from their pads are pretty tough as they are, but it's really meant to protect the pads from abrasive snow. And more so than the pads, it's the nice soft skin in between their pads and their toes. That's really what we're protecting them from.
Okay.
Depending on the temperature of the snow, if it's that hard crystallized snow and it gets in there, or maybe it's that wet packed snow that balls up, it can bruise that kind of tender skin area or give them a split. And so that's the main thing that we're having them wear those booties for.
Okay. I think some people look at the prize money in this race and think, "Wow, that's a ton of money." But how much does it cost for one team for one one Iditarod, let alone year round, to feed the dogs?
Yeah. No, it is a financial undertaking. It is not cheap. The bare bones of just running the Iditarod, if you didn't have any extraneous spending involved, is going to be right around $20,000.
Yeah.
Your entry fee is $4,000. Shipping your food and gear out ahead of time onto the trail is going to be another $2,000. The contents of those bags is right around $2,000 to $3,000. Your banquet tickets, your flight to and from Nome, shipping your crates out for the dogs, shipping the dogs home once they get to Nome, your hotel rooms in Anchorage, and that's not even skimming the surface of what it costs to feed a dog team adequately, throughout the year, especially during training.
Right. Maybe how's your sponsorship? Maybe you're finished this year. Maybe we'll help.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, and it's always appreciated every little bit that people donate. Most of our sponsorship comes from, ordinary people who just, maybe come to our tour, or maybe it's a few $100, from mom and dad to sponsor Radar or whoever. And it's usually just coming from everyday people who are inspired by what we do. I know a lot of the folks who donated to my GoFundMe page were people who came to our tour and just absolutely were floored by the dogs, by Jeff and myself, and just the dogs' exuberance for life, but just their absolute love for what they do and the care that they receive here. At the end of the day, they are working animals, but they're also our pets, and they live a very happy, well-rounded life here at Husky Homestead. And I think once people kind of have an understanding of their enthusiasm for what they do and what they're bred to do, they leave here with just a completely a newfound love and understanding of what the sled dog is and what it means to be an Alaskan Husky in Alaska to some degree. It's a big part of our culture and a big part of our history, and it is very inspiring to people. So typically speaking, when people see that, they always want to contribute in some way, and that's been a huge blessing and relief for me, because obviously we're only making money in the summertime, and then in the wintertime it's all about running and training dogs. So we don't have a winter source of income, and if it wasn't for those sponsors, I wouldn't be able to do this. And sometimes we get some bigger sponsors. I was picked up by a really sweet company called Compatible Lands Foundation that I met kind of in partnership with a friend who used to rent here from Jeff. And same thing, they really enjoyed what I did at the Quest and were inspired by the humanitarian award and said, hey, we'd like to pay for your vet checks. And that, every little bit counts. There's a lot of things that go into just getting us to the starting line. One of those things that they paid for, the vet checks, every single dog that enters the Iditarod has to have an EKG, blood work done, a physical exam performed by an approved veterinarian. All these things, it's pennies, dimes, quarters, that all adds up. And at the end of the day, you are looking at, regardless, minimum a $20,000 bill just to get to know.
I got to send you something. I want to say that I fed some of your dogs.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
Do you have a GoFundMe out there right now?
I do. I believe there's a link to it on either my Instagram page, which is Otto Up North, or my Facebook, which is under the same handle.
Otto Up North. So if somebody wanted to look you up, your GoFundMe, they can go to Otto Up North.
They certainly can. Yeah, that's my Instagram handle. I think there's also a link to my website, which is of the same deal, Otto Up North, and there's ways to sponsor on there as well.
Well, I love the race, and so I want to do everything we can. I know there's people that try to shut down the race, but it's everything Alaska. I mean, what do you got to say about PETA? They try to undermine sponsors, and I'm all for it. That's what the dogs are for. They were they were
Yeah.
made to pull sleds.
Yeah, they certainly were, and people come to the start of the Iditarod, or they visit my kennel here, Jeff's kennel rather, Husky Homestead, and they just walk away totally floored by these dogs and their enthusiasm for what they do, and the care and love they receive around the clock. I mean, they're Olympic athletes, and the reality is, at the end of the day, dogs are either going to run or they won't. You cannot make them do it, and that's what's kind of fun to share with people. And I don't think there's anybody that could come to the start of the Iditarod and not realize that they love what they do, and you can't make them do it.
That's a goal.
Yeah. Oh, have you not been yet?
No, that is a goal to be there at the start. My brother and his wife drove from Ohio all the way, and they stopped at Husky Homestead, and they. My brother talked to me afterwards, and he said, I really didn't know anything about, just like you said, they both came away floored from the dogs. They get to hold some puppies. They went to the museum up there. They learned all about the Iditarod, and he was really excited when I told him that you were going to call in. He said, make sure you tell me when you're going to run that interview on the air. So yeah, I know several people that have been up there. I have not yet, but just like you say, they come away with a total different understanding of what it's all about.
Yeah, that's part of the fun for me. In the summer, when you're kind of wishing, I wish it was winter and we're on the sled again. It is really fun to get to share the enthusiasm of these dogs with other people, and to get to share the lifestyle, because that's really what it is. It's a lifestyle. It's not a hobby. This is not the kind of gig that you can be kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You're either all in or you're not, if you want to do well.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know if racing will always be in my future, but I absolutely know that dogs will be, and it's pretty hard to imagine my life without them. So,
are any electronics allowed on the sleds? I think they've got trackers on them, but
they are. Yeah.
Oh.
So the race provides us with there's a GPS, and that's kind of more for the folks at home watching from the comfort of their couch.
Right.
They can refresh the tracker every 10 seconds and see where we are and how slow or how fast we're going and where we are in comparison to the other competitors. And that's kind of what that is for. It is equipped with an SOS. If you get into a really big pickle, you could push that button. The reality is, though, the Blackhawks are not coming for a very long time. So if you really need help, your next best bet is the next person who's coming along.
Okay.
We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And again, you did have to qualify to get to this event. Stuff does happen. There are, freak accidents can certainly happen, but generally speaking, everybody who's in this race is pretty well versed with themselves, their dogs, the wilderness, and are pretty self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency is kind of what this race is all about to some degree. But that is equipped with there. I think that's more to just make the folks at home feel better. There is an SOS button.
Right. No cell phones, though, right?
You can now carry a cell phone and a GPS. I don't use it much. In fact, I just realized I didn't really take much for pictures on this race, but we were a little busy. So you can have a cell phone. It doesn't really work anywhere. I think you have cell reception in Galena, maybe. Not a ton of places you can use the phone other than using it as an alarm, and I have used it as an alarm. One of the changes to the rules this year is we didn't get wake-up calls, so you do have to be your own wake-up person. So I would often set both an alarm on my watch and my phone just to make sure I didn't oversleep.
Can you not track other teams, though? Is there a rule against that, knowing where other people are?
Not necessarily now that there's two-way communication, and you can pretty much see where people are to some degree when you sign in and out of a checkpoint, because anybody who's already there, been through, already has their signature and time on there. A lot of the checkpoints, there's a comm area, and they've got the tracker up and whatnot, and so when you're in there refilling your water canteen and your coffee or whatever, you can walk in there and oftentimes see the tracker or ask about, get a weather report, see what people further up the trail are doing. And it is smart to kind of get some of that intel if you think about it. It's good to know what's coming up ahead. There's the moose incident this year pretty early on in the race. And,
I can't wait to talk about the moose incident.
I bet. It really wasn't that exciting. I think the only people rather, it was really exciting for were Jesse and Dallas, obviously, and thankfully Dallas's dog is okay, and the rest of us were very thankful for him for dispatching the moose.
Where did this take place?
Somewhere between Squetna and Finger Lake. And I was towards the front of the pack at that point. I was camping on the side of the trail when we shot it. I remember hearing the gun go off. It was so far in the distance, though I wasn't really sure what it was. And essentially what happened, and this happens from time to time, you get a really pissed off moose that is not interested in getting out of the trail, and that is absolutely a hazard to your dog team. I mean, if given the opportunity, they can and will stomp a dog to death. And so I know many of us were very thankful for Dallas for taking care of that, because most of the time moose encounters are not aggressive, but they absolutely can be. And so
yeah, I would just say, remember the Alamo, remember Susan Butcher. I think she had 3 dogs killed by a moose.
Yeah, and that is a very real threat. It's rare. It doesn't happen often anymore, but it absolutely can happen, and you do need to be aware of it. So
I ask you this off the air, but I want to ask you on the air. So do all mushers pack heat? A pack a gun?
So yes and no. I don't know that all of us do. I do have a firearm that I have carried in notoriously bad sections of trail, not necessarily on the Iditarod. My rookie year was a pretty deep snow year, so a lot of people were having some scary moose encounters. I thankfully did not, but I had a few close calls. And that year I was carrying with me, obviously for protection, mostly for my dogs, not so much myself. But when the snow is really deep like that, the moose don't want to get out of the trail, right? They're not dumb. They want to travel on the path of least resistance as well. And once they've had a long, overbearing winter and they're hungry and they're tired, they don't want to get out of the trail. And a team of dogs looks like a pack of wolves. The art there is to not get too close to them. You want to give moose a wide berth. Well, the problem we were having in 2022 was we were giving them wide berths, not getting real close, but they didn't want to get out of the trail, and I can't blame them. They're tired, they're angry, and your best bet was to try to turn the dog team around and just not have a confrontation. Well, you can't always do that on the Iditarod Trail. So many of us were carrying guns that year. I ended up getting rid of mine. We were able to safely pass them off to the race marshal if we did not want to carry them, out through the interior. Once you're out of the interior and out on the coast, you're probably not going to see a moose.
Yeah.
So I did have one 2 years ago, the first time I ran the Iditarod, but honestly, it was kind of a headache. The biggest thing about carrying a gun is you are responsible for that gun, and I personally don't like having a loaded gun in my sled. You got to always worry about it. You got to worry about where it is, especially if you leave your sled at a checkpoint. There's kids in the villages. So I'm personally in a race not comfortable carrying.
I totally understand that. I wouldn't want to leave a sled with a loaded firearm.
Yes, exactly. So that is the thing about having a loaded gun, is then you always have to know where that gun is at all times. I do occasionally have it on me, during spring mushing when I'm out here traveling in a remote wilderness setting right out of our kennel here, because we're not in a race and there is nobody coming to help you if you have a problem. And in the springtime, again, when the snow is deep and the moose have had a long winter, the odds might be better that you run into a cranky moose. And so I think more often than not, though, it's not so much about having the gun as it's being aware and not getting too close to one. Give it time to get out of the trail. Again, they are a prey animal. Typically, once they get out of the trail and they've got their back turned to you and they're in flight mode, they are going to run off. And that's the time when you can, release your dog team and continue on down the trail. But you definitely do not want to get within 50 to 70 yards of one if it's not wanting to get out of the trail.
I'm not sure.
You need to stop well before that and read their body language.
Right. Well, Dallas Seavey was the winner, and he did kill this moose. I don't know what kind of a handgun you have to kill a moose, but it must take a pretty good handgun.
Yeah, I mean, the caliber I carry is a 357.
Well, that's a
I
pretty
know
good caliber.
that's a pretty good caliber. I know some people like 44 mags. I feel like a little overkill for myself, but you never know.
You never know. Dallas kills this moose.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea that rule number 14 says if it's a game animal, you have to gut it and inform the people. And I know he got penalized. He said it was ugly. I don't even know if he attempted to gut it, but he got penalized 2 hours, correct?
I believe so, yeah, and I think he served that sentence in cripple.
Okay, because let's see. Besides whatever sleep you catch along the way, you've got a mandatory 24-hour and 2 8 hours. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. A mandatory 24 and 2 mandatory 8s. One of those 8s has to be taken somewhere on the Yukon route, so that's between Ruby and Caltag. And then the last mandatory 8 is in White Mountain, which is about 70 miles from the finish line.
What did the crime scene look like by the time you got there? You said everybody's running over this moose.
Well, yeah, I mean, not too many people had been over it yet, and we went right over top of it. It wasn't quite out of tell yet, and it was on kind of a blind, 90-degree corner, so you kind of see the dogs all, kind of hop and skipping over it, like, what the heck is that? And then you come around the corner and sled's going over a moose, and you're like, whoa, okay. Hope it's still dead. And yeah, but I don't think anybody's dogs were phased by it. I know mine weren't. They kind of, did a weird skip hop over top of it, but they're pretty forward oriented. So when they're going down the trail, they're going to run over just about anything.
So I almost think that the penalty spurred Dallas on even more to win the thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Or, it could have helped him. A lot of rest. Resting early on is not a wrong move. You definitely want to bank up some rest to have some. It's an art, and I admire Dallas. What he's done is commendable. I'm not sure it will ever be repeated to get 6 wins. And, there's a point where you can be, I don't know, maybe too conservative in the beginning, and you have more time to make up, which is kind of what I was doing. But he has really mastered the art and skill of, that run-rest schedule and getting them on a good routine and getting them first to Nome. So I applaud him for that. I think he's a pretty talented dog driver, to say the least.
What's next for Amanda Otto?
Well, we got the summer season coming up. We actually have one more race to do. Jeff's doing a little fun 50-mile race up in Indiana this weekend with his daughter, Callie, so I'm going to help him out with that.
Where's that?
It's going to be up in Indiana. So Tekla, Susan Butcher's daughter, is putting on a really cool race. This is the first one. So it's called the T-Dog 200, and then there's a couple shorter mileages, fun runs, if you will, that they're going to do as well. So Jeff and Callie are going to do the 50-mile event with 6 dogs each, and that'll take them about 5 hours or so. So it'll be a pretty fast race, but that'll be fun for them to do. So we're heading up to Indiana tomorrow night to do that.
I will have to look that up. How do you spell that? Are you saying it sounds like the state of Indiana? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, Banana. Yeah, it's N-E.
Okay.
Yeah, N-E-N-A. Oh, I need to check my spelling. Banana. N-E-N-A-N-A.
I wondered if Jeff was still mushing.
He is on occasion.
Because I had read where
I coaxed him into a couple runs with me this year, and he still loves to run the puppy team every once in a while, and I can still every now and then with enough notice get him out on our trails with the adults from time to time. But his grandkids just moved back to the area, so he loves spending time with them. He loves the trail groom, which is great because it's one less thing I don't have to do.
Yeah.
And we have a pretty slick trail groomer, so he loves to hook that up to the snow machine and tow that around the property. And he's still involved to some degree.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't see him behind a sled a ton anymore, but I think he's pretty excited for this race.
I've loved following his career. I think he might be a little bit. Yeah, I think Jeff's around 70. Is that about right?
He is 67.
Okay, 67. Well, I'm really an old guy. Jeff is. I did a little bit of research on you. Jeff's had some pretty spectacular things to say about you. You're efficient. You're fast. You're great in the checkpoints. You're fiercely independent, he said. He said, as her coach, he's talked some race strategy, but you make your own decisions. But he's got so many things to compliment you on, especially, like you say, your dog care.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Um, can you listen to music on, since this is a radio station, I've got to ask if you ever listen to music, what kind of music do you like?
You know, I do listen to music, not typically while I'm running dogs, though. I don't like having, I like being able to hear. I don't like having headphones in when I'm running the dogs.
Right.
I have kind of an eclectic mix. I'm a big fan of movie scores.
I love movie scores.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Anything by Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
I love Gladiator and Interstellar. I love both those soundtracks. Those are good. And I obviously listen to music with words in it too, but I kind of bop around genre to genre. I've been on a lo-fi kick as of late. I listen to that while I do artwork because I do draw and sketch and watercolor and whatnot.
I'm going to text you a couple of suggestions that I've found that are good for late night or for, I got to believe one of the coolest things in the world is being out there on a still night in the dark, decent temperature, mushing along with your dogs. That's got to be, all by yourself out there in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, it's one of the best parts for me. I love the solitude. I love traveling alone with my dog team and the luminaries of the nighttime sky, especially on the Yukon River in the Iditarod. I think 2 times now that's been my favorite stretch of trail. It's an incredibly vast section of trail being out there on the Yukon, and it really humbles you. It kind of makes you feel like you're this little dot on the timeline of eternity. And this particular time, I was doing it in the dark, and the aurora was out. I got some fabulous pictures of the northern lights with the dog team, and I think it was about 30 below on that particular run, but it was just a beautiful, crisp, clear evening, and the dogs were just surging ahead. And it is that kind of that solitude and traveling alone with your dog team. You kind of feel like one single organism. That's one of the very special parts. Aspects.
You've got some dark sky country there, which would really be nice. There's too many lights everywhere else to see the stars and the Milky Way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can often see them with perfect clarity from my cabin up here at night. It's pretty wonderful.
Do you mind if I read a quote that you said?
Sure.
Well, you did say you have to get tough or die. That's a pretty good quote right there. But
that's kind of an inside joke between Jeff and myself, but there's a lot of truth to it.
Yeah, I can tell that there's some inside jokes. I think Jeff likes to kid you that you need too much sleep.
Oh yeah, it's not totally a joke. Often the truth is told in jest.
No, you said I love this quote. You said the kindness and love I've received over the past few years is unfathomable. I love what I do, so the work is irrelevant. Not until you recognize and respect each dog for what they are capable of, and where they fit within the team can you fully experience and maximize the joy of traveling by dog team. Nothing brings me greater satisfaction than witnessing my dogs accomplish what they were born to do. I love that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So, what have I missed? What do you want to say that I didn't ask? Is there anything we haven't covered?
Gosh, I don't think so. Pretty thorough.
Will you be in the Iditarod next year?
We'll see. I'm already getting questions about that. We take things one season at a time around here, and obviously I would love to do it again, but we'll kind of see. We'll cross that bridge when we get there at the end of the summer. So now is the time to we're going to get a little bit of time off, a little bit of a break, and relax with the dogs. Just a short break, but then we're kind of launching into the summer tour season. And yeah, usually right around sign up day in June is when I start thinking about Iditarod again.
How many people will typically stop at Husky Homestead over the course of a summer?
Oh, several thousand. The numbers have kind of fluctuated since COVID, for sure. So they're a little bit smaller than they used to be, but we now cap our tours right around 50 people. We'll occasionally make some, obviously, special accommodations for bigger tour buses of 80 and whatnot. But yeah, we do 2 to 3 tours a day, and there's usually right around 40 to 50 people at those tours 5 days a week.
Okay. Well, I bought my raffle ticket today, and I'm sure this interview is going to help me finally win. Although Jeff says you can't just buy one, you got to buy two.
Yes, he's not wrong.
I keep buying one, and I am not winning. But it's your best odds you're going to find around is buying one of those raffle tickets. So I want everybody to be perfectly clear. If they want to help out a dog team, they can go to Otto up north and make a donation.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to help feed your dogs because I'm proud of you. I think everybody's proud of you. So what?
No, thank you, Tim.
Yeah. And I'm actually very happy that you would be nice enough to take an hour out of your schedule to call a little radio station. But we do stream worldwide.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
I am going to post up some pictures of you, and I'll play that interview next week. And I will text you because I've got some major awards from WQUD to send to you.
Okay. Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing them, and I also have some pictures from the race if you would like those. Or
I'd love some pictures from the race to post up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get those to you.
Okay, and once again, well, we're so thankful that you called in. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having my dogs. My boy Fossil is sitting here quietly listening.
Well. I love the dogs, and you really are an iron woman. You really are. So thanks once again, and I'll be in touch.
All right. Sounds good, Tim. You have a great evening.
All right. Good night.
Bye.